alignment between the SDGs and our national development goals, Vision 2030, creates a framework within which we can identify and achieve our priorities, not least of which is to ensure the dignity of the individual. What has become increasingly evident, however, is that securing the resources for the implementation of these development objectives remains critical both at the national and international levels. In recognition of this fact, Jamaica has partnered with Canada to identify new and innovative means of financing development. Through the Group of Friends on Financing the SDGs, which our countries co-chair, we have been promoting the establishment of partnerships with the private sector, philanthropic organizations, and academic institutions. We're exploring innovative financial mechanisms that can spur investments needed to accelerate implementation of the SDGs. Issues related to global economic governance, debt sustainability, and SDG financing take on even more significance for highly indebted middle-income countries like Jamaica, which have large public investment needs but limited fiscal space. Or reduced access to concessionary finance and official development assistance is a direct consequence of our middle-income designation. We contend that the use of GDP per capita as the sole criteria to graduate countries such as ours from concessionary finance represents an inadequate and inaccurate measure of a country's true development status. Accordingly, middle-income countries face the risk of having their hard-won socioeconomic gains reversed as a result of loss of well-needed financial support, and precisely at the time they need to consolidate and build on the gains they have made. We therefore commend and thank those, including the Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean and the Commonwealth Secretariat, who advocate for the application of a broader set of indicators that take account of the structural gaps in our countries. From a global perspective, it is important that the international economic and financial architecture is aligned with Agenda 2030 and takes account of this very important distinction. Jamaica therefore urges that policymakers embed the SDGs into their design of the international regulatory frameworks. Mr. President, Jamaica looks forward to the convening later this year of the 11th WTO Ministerial Conference in Buenos Aires, which brings with it the potential for advancing the Doha Development Agenda. As a small island developing state with an open economy, highly reliant on foreign trade, we are dependent on a vibrant and dynamic global trading environment. We must secure improved market opportunities beyond our shores. We cannot, however, participate in the international economic and trading system without correspondent banking relations. Several international banks have withdrawn correspondent banking services from many small countries, including in the Caribbean. This in an effort to de-risk their client portfolios in response to stringent regulatory penalties for compliance breaches. However, what is viewed by international banks as a simple balance sheet issue has caused unintended negative spillover effects for countries in the Caribbean with serious political and economic consequences. We call for urgent international attention to be given to this deepening crisis. Mr. President, I now turn to the issue of non-communicable diseases, which exact a high socioeconomic and developmental cost on all countries, but disproportionately so in small island developing states. Jamaica agrees that an effective response to this global pandemic is best addressed through multi-stakeholder partnerships in a comprehensive whole-of-government response. We are firmly on this path. Jamaica is addressing NCDs by promoting healthy lifestyles from birth, increasing awareness of NCDs, and encouraging physical activity across the country. We're also strengthening our policy and regulatory frameworks to address obesity at childhood and adulthood and other risk factors. Such efforts should be complemented by action taken at the global level, and we therefore look forward to the 2018 high-level meeting on NCDs and reiterate the call for greater access by developing countries to the findings of modern research and technology. Mr. President, Jamaica is committed to the empowerment of women and girls and our young people. We've revitalized our National Youth Parliament and created a National Youth Advisory Council to ensure that young people have a voice at policy-making levels in our country. We're strengthening our legislative and policy frameworks to address violence against women and girls and to foster economic opportunities. We will also protect our children from abuse by maintaining vigilance with respect to new and emerging threats such as cyberbullying and sexual exploitation online. Earlier this year, Jamaica became a party to the Hague Convention on the Civil Aspects of International Child Abduction and enacted legislation for its implementation. As we strengthen our national institutional framework to address trafficking in children, we also look forward to participating in next week's high-level meeting of the General Assembly on the appraisal of the Global Plan of Action to combat trafficking in persons. Mr. President, the movement of persons across borders is a natural phenomenon. Migrants are an asset to both their countries of destination and their countries of origin. Jamaica highly values the contribution that our diaspora makes to national development and to the development of their host countries. We are actively working on strategies to deepen our engagement. Consistent with a renewed focus to place people at the center of sustainable development, we must not forget the plight of refugees and persons displaced by conflict and natural disasters, occurrences not of their own making. Against this background, the ongoing deliberations on the Global Compact for Safe, Orderly and Regular Migration take on even more significance as we move to the intergovernmental negotiations phase during this session of the General Assembly. Mr. President, Jamaica's adherence to the principles of the United Nations is rooted in a belief in multilateralism and the benefits we derive from collaboration and cooperation. The most intractable disputes require us to engage collectively in the search for lasting and meaningful solutions. In this regard, we reiterate our call for an end to the economic, commercial, and financial embargo against Cuba. This unjust embargo has restricted the ability of a hard-working and self-reliant people to engage in legitimate trade, to travel, and to undertake international financial transactions. Turning to the Middle East, we continue to believe that the best solution to the Israeli-Palestinian crisis rests in a negotiated political settlement based on a just, lasting, and comprehensive agreement that guarantees the security of Israel and provides for a Palestinian state within internationally recognized borders. With respect to the situation concerning Western Sahara, we recall the Security Council's appeal to all parties to show realism and a spirit of compromise to move negotiations forward. Jamaica therefore supports the relaunching of the negotiations under the auspices of the United Nations, leading to the resumption of a process with the aim of reaching a just, lasting, and mutually acceptable political solution. Mr. President, our collective efforts in all these political, economic, and social areas require an effective and dynamic United Nations. Jamaica therefore supports reforms that improve coordination, enhance coherence, and strengthen the effectiveness of the organization. Reform measures must ensure that the UN remains connected to the people it seeks to serve and must be informed by the realities on the ground in program countries. They should advance all three key pillars of the work of the UN: peace and security, development, and the promotion of human rights. A renewed and revitalized United Nations reform effort will allow us to reap the full benefits of multilateralism. Mr. President, I conclude by reaffirming Jamaica's unfailing belief in our ability as a community of nations whose destiny and prosperity are intertwined to make a difference in the lives of every human being. I therefore encourage all of us to be bold and unrelenting in our quest to make this world a better place, leaving no one behind. Let us go forward with the conviction that we can achieve peace and prosperity for our peoples and protect our planet for the benefit of future generations. I thank you.
I thank the Minister for Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade of Jamaica for her statement. I now give the floor to His Excellency Mohammed Asim, Minister for Foreign Affairs of Maldives.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Mr. President, Mr. Secretary General, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and a very good afternoon to you all. We stand today at the crossroads between old wars and new conflicts, between what we know and what we fear, between the needs of a changing planet and the demands of a growing population. We remain caught between human ambition and human limitations. And in these times of change, we must turn once again to the principles that define this organization, those that make us who we are and who we would like to become. Rising from the darkness of war, the United Nations shone like a beacon of light. Dedicated to seeking peace, this organization became the purpose for many. For many of those fighting for freedom, fighting fear, fighting for the right to be, the United Nations was and is the best hope we have for humanity. The United Nations was built on the promise of peace and salvation, a place where every issue can be debated for a solution, where every nation has a voice regardless of size and regardless of might. This is why we believe that the theme for this session of the General Assembly is most appropriate, focusing on people striving for peace and a decent life for all on a sustainable planet. This is what makes up the core of this organization. This is what defines our work. Please allow me to congratulate you, Mr. President, on your assumption as the 72nd President of the General Assembly. I also welcome the Secretary General, Mr. Antonio Guterres, to his first general debate and commend him for the dedication he has demonstrated through his first year in office. Mr. President, the United Nations is what we all make of it. It is made up of us, the member states. Its successes and its weaknesses are determined by how much we put into it. My country, the Maldives, envisions a United Nations that is fair, that is representative of its diverse membership, that takes into account the views and opinions of all, and forms consensus based on compromise and dialogue. A United Nations that commits and delivers. Our vision for a stronger United Nations is founded on President Abdullah Yamin Abdul Gayoom's policy of strengthening national resilience, economic resilience, social resilience, political resilience, and indeed, environmental resilience. Crafting meaningful global solutions built on national policies and experiences for the common problems of our times, for our common and shared destiny. Mr. President, the world must become a safer planet for all. No man, no woman, and certainly no child must suffer due to conflict. Yet we know that this is not the case. Far too many people are dying in conflicts across the world. Far too many mothers are living in fear, unsure of the fate of their children. Far too many children are seeing their futures crumbling in front of them. In Palestine, another year ends with no permanent peace, no permanent hope, an independent sovereign state of Palestine with East Jerusalem as its capital, established along the 1967 borders, is the only solution, the only way. Yet, many resolutions have been passed without action. Many peace processes have been abandoned without progress. The shameful occupation by Israel continues without any consequences. Violence, economic deprivation, fear, hunger, and hopelessness. This is what a child in Palestine is born into. Generations have now matured, knowing nothing else. This must end. In Syria, over 250,000 people have lost their lives, with many millions displaced and many more millions made refugees. War crimes have been committed, chemical weapons used, inhumane treatment normalized. This suffering must end. Mr. President, as hundreds of innocent people continue to flee the violence, conflict, and endless suffering, the greatest numbers since the world wars, it has become imperative that we seek sustainable, long-term solution that addresses the well-being and welfare of migrants and refugees. Incidents of hatred, Islamophobia, xenophobia, what has become so frequent today, can only breed more violence.
I just can't control my feet. Sunshine, I don't blame it